Welcome to Human Potential at Work, the show where we explore social impact, inclusion, and empowerment of everyone, including persons with disabilities. Your host is Debra, CEO of Rue Global Impact and co-founder and chairwoman of Billion Strong, an identity and empowerment organization designed to bring billions of voices of persons with disabilities together. To join the global community and to donate to the cause, visit billion-strong.org. That's billion-strong.org. And now, on to the episode.
Hello, everyone. My name is Debra Rue, and I'm the CEO of Rue Global Impact and the Executive Director of Billion Strong. Billion Strong is all about identity and pride for the 1.2 to 1.7 billion people with disabilities and all of us living with the experience of disability. So all of our friends, families, caregivers, and anybody in society that cares about really making sure that everybody's included. Today, my guest is Gareth Ford Williams, and I don't know if you know him, but he's considered very popular in our community, and he is formerly with BBC, and what they've done under his leadership at BBC has been just stunning. And I often, people will ask me, brands will ask, who's the best? BBC's always at the top. Always at the top. Now, Gareth is no longer with BBC. He actually got to retire, but he doesn't obviously understand what the word retirement means. And so he has created two new organizations, Ably with a few other people, and he's going to talk about that. And then also Double FW, which I made him repeat that a couple of times, but he's a partner that is also a Ford Williams, who happens to be his wife, Ginny. And so that's very cool. And we're going to talk a lot about it. But first of all, I'm going to remember to give a visual description. I'm a older white woman with gray and purple hair and red glasses today. And I'm looking down to see what I'm wearing, a black shirt and flowered dress. I've become so flowery as I'm getting older. I don't know what that's about, but I really am excited about having Gareth on. Some of y'all know that I also co-host Access Chat with Neil Milliken and Antonio Santos. Gareth was our very first guest. So he is just such a leader in so many ways. I think you're going to enjoy this conversation. He is just so powerful. But also, if you're somebody that wants to work with Gareth, we're going to tell you how to do that as well, because he is considered a leader in our global community because he's actually done it. A lot of people talk about Gareth has actually done it, but I love the way he looks at this. So Gareth, let's start by letting you introduce yourself and describe yourself. And
that's fantastic. You've given me an amazing. I'm doing the British embarrassed thing now. This is going, really? Honestly, I've done some of that. That was a lot of other people. I work with incredible people. I've had such sort of privilege and opportunity. But yeah, so I'm going to quickly describe myself. Follically challenged, 50-something white male with glasses and wearing a kind of khaki green top and a black T-shirt with a picture of Tigger from Winnie the Pooh behind that was given to me by my team when I left, with lots of the projects around it, because I like to describe myself and have done for a long time. And I get described as Tigger because I have ADHD, I have dyslexia. I've always been fascinated, there's a slight side on this, is that you can be dyslexic, autistic, dyspraxic, but you do have no person-centered way of describing ADHD. You can only have ADHD, you cannot be ADHD. So I adopted Tigger. So Tigger is my ADHD. And so, yeah. And I know a few other Tiggers. We know some other Tiggers, don't we? We do. Yeah. So, yeah, I've been involved directly in accessibility for about 18 years. I came, as with many people with ADHD, the wobbliest career path that makes no sense at all. I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up. And my kids have far more idea of where they're going than I ever have. But yeah, it's just one of those things. And I've always got involved in things and always dived into projects and said yes to stuff and given things a go and try and spend as much time listening to people as doing things about anything. And I just love pulling things apart and understanding them. And this is a fascinating area because particularly in digital technology, it's constantly evolving. And the more that you find out about people, the more complex they become, the more fascinating and interesting it becomes. And then bringing the two things together, and I find is brilliantly, it's challenging, but in an incredibly interesting and wonderful way. And I've never got bored. And for someone with an incredibly short attention span, this is
Right.
probably, this is done quite well. This is,
It's almost like one thing that I love about your work is it's all because we can make accessibility and inclusion all about compliance and laws, and those things are important. But
Mhm.
you are really making it about the experience. And I remember hearing about a project you were doing early on where you were working with children that were blind and seeing how they were responding to programs and stuff that y'all were showing on
Mhm.
BBC. And I was so fascinated. But when before we got on air, you happened to mention something that I want you to talk about here briefly because I think about my son's experience growing up with his sister with Down syndrome. And it really influenced his life and his life work
Mhm.
and how he saw the world. And it's just reminded me in a small way what you had said about your father when you were a child. And so I was just wondering if you wouldn't talk to the audience a little bit about that, because I believe part of the reason why you understand why we have to really rethink how we're doing things is because of the way you were brought up.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, he turned 87 yesterday. It was so yeah, so he's very retired. But yeah, he was a drama therapist, and he became the headmaster of a residential school in South Manchester, particularly for children who had aphasia, autism, and we had a whole spectrum of different conditions and syndromes. And it was a residential school where they stayed during the week and went home at the weekend, because they came from right the way across North England. It wasn't just in Manchester. They were from Wales and Yorkshire and up in the northeast. And so they came together, and from age 2, we lived on site. We were originally on a flat above the school, and then the school expanded into that. And then we had a little house the field was our back garden, and all the kids played on there. And I came home from school or in before school, and they were my friends that I played with. And children, I think, have got an amazing capacity to get past boundaries. Very small children are incredible. They see another child and they want to play. Play is so important. It doesn't matter if they speak different languages, and it doesn't matter if they're from different backgrounds, and it doesn't matter about what their challenges are. They still want to play, and they want to play together. And they work around this, and they're not afraid of failing. They're not afraid of getting it wrong. They're not afraid of asking awkward questions and direct questions. And so they get past stuff, and then we grow up and we lose that ability. We become self-conscious. We're taught prejudice, or we have no experience of people. And we
Right.
unlike myself, I say my upbringing was a very privileged upbringing because of those experiences. And I think a lot of other people were not afforded those privileges and struggle with empathy, even though they have an amazingly good will and they want to do the right thing. You can see it, and it's particularly an older generation. Ourselves, Deborah, it's our peers where the problem.
I
I think with
agree.
more integration in schools now, you're
Yes.
seeing these younger people coming through into the workplace, and they have far less of the issues that we've seen in our generation. Far less. It's brilliant
I
to
agree.
watch.
I agree. And I remember whenever we went to when my son caught up with my daughter because we held her back a year so she could get more fundamental training. And there was a dance at the middle school, and it was their first year in middle school. And the boys were on one side of the room and the girls were on the other, and
No,
we're not going to meet in
no,
the middle. And then
never.
we also went to a party a couple of days later with a bunch of adults with disabilities, and it was fun and a free for all. And my son said, "Oh, that's a much better party. I want to go to these kind of parties, mom." But you're right. People don't get exposed to it and they don't understand. But I was worried. Now, my daughter is 35 years old. And she just turned 35. I was so worried that when she was in middle school, I thought that she would be bullied. And what happened was my daughter was not bullied. She did not get bullied. Now my son got bullied because they all bullied each other. They all did. But somehow Sarah was off limits. Now the kids with autism weren't off limits. But it was just interesting to watch it because I thought for sure, but even that generation had already said, no, this is ridiculous. And now the younger generations, they just don't see it. They don't understand why we can't really explore who we are. Right
Yeah.
now, on the screen, I have Debra Rue, she, her, hers. And I have a lot of people my age saying, what the heck are they doing? And you got to break it down all into little tiny pieces until we can come back and say, oh, we're all complicated human beings. All of us
Yeah.
matter. We all can
Yeah.
contribute. Let's make sure technology works for all of us. But I do believe your upbringing really did impact your views as a designer. So let's talk
And
a
this is
little.
design. Let's
It
not get
is
past this. This is not about standards. It's design. It's about thinking about people, because no one, but something is just an idea. So we have an idea for building a new website or a new library or anything. And no one has actually designed anything yet, but we're all talking about it as a group within and we're going to build this, and we start gathering requirements. As soon as you start designing, that is when inaccessibility becomes a part of that. Inaccessibility is an outcome of bad design. Everyone has access to an idea. No one is excluded for an idea, but as soon as that idea becomes realized, the decisions that are made in that process slowly filter more and more people out if you're not aware of what you're doing. We used to have, Jamie and I started this at the BBC, we used to have a little process that we used to do sometimes with teams that were at the beginning. And we would ask the question, this is a genuine workshop question, is who are we willing to exclude? And you were greeted by a room of silence because nobody wants to go first. And we're going, we've got a board here. We're going to write we're going to say who. And this is not active exclusion. It might be for certain legal reasons, but
right.
and I'm dealing with I've got a client at the minute, and they're the company that own Guinness. And they're saying, well, actually, we don't want anyone under 18. And so there's an active exclusion there, which is very sensible. But it's that whole thing of own exclusion. And so if we were doing something like we were designing a new application for the news for the BBC, and we're not going to actively exclude anyone, but we would say, is this for the under fives? And then everyone would go, no, it's not. And you're going, well, if they can't use it, we're not going to be bothered. That's not going to worry us that anyone under the age of 5 can't access the mainstream news. And they'd be like, okay. And then we would then expand it a little bit. Is anyone, this is a mobile application. It can't be used by anyone who hasn't got a mobile phone. They're on. We're willing to exclude them. They can borrow a phone. They can find a phone, but we're not going to think about them. We're not going to think it's a UK-owned service, for instance. And so it's geo-locked to the UK. It might be an app. So anything that's not a native British language, which is what the scope of the BBC has to do, native British languages, and there are 4. And so there's English, there's Gaelic, there's Welsh, and there's British Sign Language, which is a native British language, which is why, from a cultural point of view, it has to be included in the output. So it's not one of those. We're not going to actively exclude someone who doesn't speak one of those, because there might be translation software or other ways they can get into it, but we're not going to actively include them. And so you start building a picture up. And I think anyone who's not on that list gets a designed experience. And as soon as you start ignoring a group and say they're not getting a designed experience, you say, we have to add them on the active exclusion list. If we're not going to do that, here's the pen, you add them, but take ownership of your decision.
Wow. Powerful.
And it's very powerful. It gets people to start thinking about who they're including and who they're not including. And it helps deal and bring to the surface certain, concerns, worries, people feeling like they don't understand what is being asked for them. And so they need help. And it hopefully tackles some of the unconscious biases. And you want that open discussion to happen. And I think it's quite a powerful way of,
Gareth,
of not avoiding the problem.
I know I could talk to you. I love the way you think, but do you mind, only because you've given me some stories over the years, but what you did with your amazing team at BBC, it really was a game changer. And so do you mind maybe talking about some of the projects y'all did, some of the most fun, let's say some of the most fun, but the reason why I ask,
Yeah.
and I'm being selfish here, is because I want to make sure other countries see. And I've always been trying to I'm a BBC viewer living in the United States, and I prefer BBC, but we have a whole lot of other, networks in the United States that I wish would follow BBC's lead. So do you mind just exploring
I,
how? creative yoga.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
I'm always standing on the shoulders of giants with that organisation, and it has probably got the oldest accessibility program I've ever come across. I've never it predates me decades, and I just rocked up when everyone was asking a question about digital, and literally I wasn't going for a job. I literally had a go at someone outside of a lift, and but I'll come to that bit in a minute. That's another story. They turned it into my problem because I was the only one that was daft enough to take it on, because they knew there was a massive problem and no one had a plan.
Right.
And
Right.
I'd stood up and said, I think I've got an approach. I don't think I've got an answer, but I think the way we could do it this way. And then it became my problem, which is a very BBC thing to do. But the BBC is about informing, educating and entertain. That's actually its brief, is to inform, educate and entertain everyone in the UK. And it uses the word everyone. It has a royal charter. It has exemptions from certain laws like the Equalities Act with its output. You can't sue the BBC for inaccessibility. It's because the Royal Charter says that everyone should be able to access it. And so it's over its history. It's slowly tried to understand what that means, and it's built on this. And the charter gets renewed every now and again, and then there's more information put in it, and there's more documentation around it, and policy grows, etc. It goes all the way back to there was a charity they were involved in really early on in the 1930s to make radios for the blind, and it still is. Wireless is for the blind is still a charity, and it's separate to the BBC now. It does its own thing, but it was very much involved in its early days. And then it did the first InVision signing for British Sign Language for the news in 1957. And that all just became about, from what I understand, and it's a bit sort of myths and legends of the BBC, but that there was a news director who's one of his closest friends was culturally deaf and he couldn't access the news. And so he stuck a signer next to the newsreader. When I'm the director, what I say goes, there's a signer stood there interpreting for my friend. And then it got such a great response, they ended up creating a News for the Deaf program. And then slowly, then more and more, then deaf programming started coming out from that. And eventually it does interpretation of quite a lot of content, and it's grown from there. And then Professor Alan Newell from Southampton University in the late 1960s was working with the BBC around teletext, which was the first ever a platform for text-based content, digital content. And they built into it, it wasn't even a byproduct. It was actually a really major part of it, was to build in closed captioning for the first time. No one had ever done it before. And so they launched the first closed captioning service nationally in 1979. And they built the first full-scale production tools in the 1990s for audio description. And they brought in a thing called bimedia production, which makes all of the reportage output accessible to the blind without needing AD. I can do a whole session on that. But all of this existed before me. I joined way after this. And so from a broadcast point of view, they were always trying to progressively deal with this. They weren't always getting it right, and there were always gaps, because that's evolution. And I turned up, and literally, my son at the time, he has cerebral palsy. He's 22 now and is an actor. Zach Ford Williams. He's actually at the moment filming a drama with the BBC. So I've left the BBC,
so
but
cool.
the legacy of the Ford Williamses continues.
Congratulations.
He's very cool. He's gone through drama school. He's gone for the full classical training. He's massive
Wow.
Shakespeare nerd. Absolutely loves it. Decided at aged 5 he was going to be an actor.
Wow.
And has never changed his mind. I don't know. I have no idea what I want to be. So I'm always impressed by that. But he couldn't access some of the children's games online. So there's two brands. There's CBBS, which is for the under 6s. And then there's over 6 to 12s, which is CBBC. And they have their own TV channels, their own apps and their own websites. And it's all done for those age groups, lots of educational stuff. And he was moving from CBBS to CBBC, and he could access some of the games and play them with his friends, but he couldn't on CBBC, he could on CBBS. And this is what sparked the conversation. I didn't realise that there were 3 people, Cecilia Weiss, Ian Hamilton, who you'll have come across, and Emma Pratt-Richards. I don't know, you may have come across Emma Pratt-Richards. She's now at Barclays as an accessibility lead. It was those 3 were making Switch games on CBBS in their own kind of bubble, there was no big strategy around it. They were just doing it. They were looking at games accessibility. And I went, if we're getting it right over there, why don't we get it right everywhere else?
Right.
What's stopping us? And I met this wonderful person called Tony Aggie. Tony's now the director of digital at New York Public Library. And he was controller, which is like a directorship of bbc.co.uk. And I met Tony and we talked about it, and he helped me write a business case. We took it to the board. There was a wonderful director general of the BBC there, like the CEO of the BBC, the director general is called Mark Thompson. He's now the CEO of the New York Times.
Wow.
And Mark was just like, yeah, why aren't we doing this?
Right.
And so they gave me a project and went, we're building a new thing over here. We haven't got permission for it yet. This was about 2005. They went, just write all the requirements you like, explore everything, be nice, and let's discover it there, what we need to do. And then we will take it to everywhere else, and we'll sort of feed that through. Everything we learn in one place, we can apply everywhere else, and then turn it into things that will help us apply it. And that eventually that project became known as BBC iPlayer. And so we built accessibility. We did all of the user research, and we started with human need. Always start with people, understand their lives and their lived experiences, because this thing has got to fit in their lives, and they have to understand it. They've got to enjoy it. It's always that principle in WCAG that's missing, is enjoy. You know, perceivable, operable, robust, understandable. But if you don't enjoy it, if it's a thing you're supposed to enjoy, and if you don't enjoy it, you're not coming back. It doesn't matter about the first four.
Right.
I think someone, when they were written, we were talking about government websites and banking or something, things that nobody enjoys, those things. But we have collaborative platforms. We have online gaming. We have streaming platforms. We have social media. We have all sorts of stuff to where we go for entertainment now, and people have the same rights to the same entertainment. So they inform, educate, entertain. And it has to be equal. It has to be comparative. People have to come away with the same learnings or the same feeling of around the brand. And that engagement, it has to be a designed and a brand experience. And so this is what we did. And we built a team around this. And there was Lucy Dodd, who's now Lucy Pulicino. She's amazing. Andrew Strachan, who was a researcher who brought in all of the work around. And he was culturally deaf, and he was a research engineer already working on broadcast subtitles sort of in the digital space. And so we brought him in, and Kevin Carey, who ended up becoming the chairman. He left my team to become the chairman of the Royal National Institute.
We all love Kevin. Yeah, he's amazing.
Oh, absolutely wonderful person. And so this was this little gang of four, and then it kind of grew from there.
Right. One thing I love, Gareth, that happens is, so you have all these committed leaders at BBC making a difference, figuring it out. And then eventually people leave, they retire, they go to other organizations, and then they're going to do it there too.
This is the whole thing. This is the whole thing.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah. And this is always part of what I've liked is seeing all these amazing people. So on my team, I've had all sorts of people, from Henny Swan to Ian Pouncey to
wasn't Jonathan part of your?
Jonathan was I went off to there was a TV platform called YouView, and so Jonathan stepped into the role while I went away, because he was doing a thing called BBC Jam before that, which unfortunately didn't really see the light of day. Loads of accessibility in it, but long story. But it now happened, and Jonathan came in and took over the steering of the ship, and then he left to set up his company, Hassle Inclusion, and then I came back from YouView and carried on. And yeah, it was. There's so many people that have come out of that. Alistair Duggan and all sorts of people have come out from the BBC, and obviously, yeah, and it's great to see what they've done. And it's like ripples. You see, you chuck a stone pond, you see the ripples go out, and it affects stuff, and then other people get involved. It's wonderful. It's wonderful. We did a load of first things. We did a lot of stuff, but it was all driven by need. We had the 2012 Olympics coming up. Came back from YouView, the next big thing. Right, we've landed we're now the 2012 Olympics broadcaster. And the brief was, these have got to be, the output has got to be the most accessible ever. And and actually, I still think it's the most accessible to date.
I agree. I think it is. I agree.
So we had some mobile applications, Debra. We were suddenly going to be pushing all of the content onto mobile apps. There were no mobile accessibility guidelines. So the three of us, there's four with Al Duggan as well. He got involved as well. He was the engineering lead. And we're going to have to write the first ever accessibility guidelines for mobile, because we have to get this right for the Olympics. And then product managers saying they have an application they're building, and we were like, can we try some stuff out there and test it? And you were driven by need. That was the point. That was the goal, was the Olympics. And we were like, we're going to have to do this, and we're going to have to do this quick. Necessity is the mother of invention, you know. and so we were never waiting around for the guidelines committees to deal with this stuff. We'll just do it and see what happens. And the BBC gets involved in designing XR and VR systems and stuff like that. So Jamie's work in understanding the barriers within those spaces, which has just gone live. No one's done that. Oh, Jamie's amazing.
Yeah.
Jamie's absolutely incredible person. And I had to make it scale in a large organization. And I looked to Yahoo. Yahoo did champions, but no one was doing accessibility champions anywhere in the industry. Right. And this was about 2007. And I was just like, well, I'll do that, but I'll just nick Yahoo's model for champions networks, but we'll do an accessibility one and try and why have a team when you can have an army?
Right.
Just have a cultural movement. This is all it. There's tons of stuff, Debra. It's honestly, I know. It's been a ride. It's been a roller coaster ride of 18 years, I can tell you.
Well, and I want to talk a little bit about AB111Y. Ably, because there's also an Abler. But anyway, I want to talk about that, but also I want to talk about double FW also only because I know a lot of corporate leaders watch this show. And one thing that I bring up all the time is what I hear from large multinational corporations is that the accessibility vendors sometimes do not understand the complexity of these gigantic. I've worked in really large corporations for many years, but just the sheer volume of what you have to do, and that is staggering. But you and your team have done it. And I always say, build it into your processes, but you don't talk about it. So I was.
No, you're absolutely right. You can't add new process in. If you start layering process on top of process, and if it becomes friction I'm dealing with a very large organization at the minute. We're looking at everything going, oh, this looks like we want to do auditing. We have to do this. We have to do this. And we're suddenly landing all of this additional process. And I go, we may need to audit too early on to understand. Let's see where we are. Auditing only tells you where you are. It tells you where you've come from. It tells you all sorts of things, but it doesn't tell you how good you are. It doesn't tell you how meaningful your experience or how good your experiences are for your users. I like to call it legal experience design because your compliance officer and your lawyers love it, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it delivers everything that your users need. It's a great starting point. Don't get me wrong. It's all full of sensible stuff. It's not full of everything you need. It's full of lots of things to get you thinking. And then you need to use those tools to design the thing that you're doing. Then you need to evaluate the thing that you're doing and then optimize it and evolve it. And this is the same for all users. You just make sure it's an inclusive process. And within organizations, you've got to make it, as frictionless as possible. One of my objectives at the BBC was to make sure that no one ever had to look at a guideline ever again. I really didn't. I like to think of
that.
I like to think of WCAG as the naughty step. It's go and read WCAG and come back in 2 days when you're done. It's like
with the overview.
And they've no idea. They're reading it going, I don't understand this. And it's the job of an accessibility person to be the interface between the two, between the users and the guidelines and the tools and things to use. And then make it easy for the organization to deliver, make it understandable and make them understand the benefit. You've got to switch as well the perspectives of this isn't about worthiness. You're not just doing nice things for disabled people. This is hugely worthwhile.
It's the right thing to do. So I
find that difficult. I find that you're right. And you're right to use that tone of voice. Exactly.
Right. And it's interesting you say without causing problems because what we've done in the States is because I'm glad we can sue corporations. I'm glad we can sue people, but we have created a real us and them. Yeah. I know. And because we've sued, it has helped other groups, but we've also created real friction, as you said. And so I know a lot, and now you're one of us. Gareth. You're in a vendor now too. How do corporations really do this when there are so many moving parts and there is friction and a lot? And I hope I'm not insulting anybody in our beautiful accessibility industry, but There's a lot of people that don't understand the complexity and how you really do it. You can point to the WCAG standards, and we do need standards,
Mhm.
but you've actually done it. And you've talked all during the show about ways you've done it, but where do you even start with your clients?
The first thing I need to do is understand what they do. And I think one of the things and this is one of the things that sometimes goodwill gets in the way as well,
Yes.
because we
Yes.
all want to fix everything. We're only doing this stuff because we see things that are broken and we want to fix them. And sometimes we don't spend enough time working out whether we're asking the right questions, whether we actually understand the barriers and understand the cause of the barriers and understand where we can fix them. How upstream is this? Where is this stuff coming from? And then you implement rules around it. I had a basic rule that no developers write alt text, because why should they? That's content. Why they don't write content? They're developers. They're building products. So why is someone asking them to determine content within the space? Actually, who chose the picture was the question I wanted to know, because good alt text is description of the intent of the use of the image. You're describing what that image tells us in context of its use. So if it's in a story, if it's a news story, it tells us something that's really important about this news story. Add that. That's your alt text. That's equivalent. The only person who knows what that is the journalist who chose it in the first place, or the picture editor or the editor or whoever. They added that because they knew. And I just say, write down the reason you did it. Write down what you did. That's the alt text.
Right.
And the same with marketeers.
Right.
Yeah, marketing.
Instead,
you have an image, use it.
right. They're explaining that this is a picture of an apple and it's red and it's why did you use the image? Why'd you use the image? So, and even something as simple as that, people are getting confused. That's why I like the way you think about it, because this is how you change things. Like you said, are we even solving the right problem? I remember an example of a customer that came to me and said that they'd spent $25,000 to braille a bus schedule. And because they had a board member that was blind. And I said, how did that work? And they said, well, it didn't work real well because our schedules are always changing. And I said, all you had to do was just make the online version of the document accessible and everybody gets it. And they were like, oh, I mean, they were trying to do
Braille signage. Braille signage is the one that always gets me. I remember we have Braille signage all over the BBC because there is a standard that says all of your signage has to have a Braille signage. And then there's Kevin Carey comes to work for me, who's congenitally blind. And I just said, just curiously said, we've got Braille on all our signage. And he just said, you have signage? He doesn't go around groping walls trying to find.
Where's
it just ticks a box against a standard. And its application, okay, when there are words having a Braille alternative in certain contexts. And the worst one I saw, this is at a university, and I got into the lift and they've got everything seems, it was quite good. And then I looked at the panel, the control panel, and all the buttons had Braille on them, which I thought was great, but they were all touch sensitive. So as you're reading the Braille, you're selecting every floor and the alarm. Well, they didn't think that one through. So that might tick a box. That's probably standards compliant.
Oh yeah.
But
I know.
It's not good design.
Yeah, we have so many examples. I know I've already kept you 10 minutes longer than I said I would.
I don't mind. I'm here as long as you like. I'm thoroughly enjoying this.
What I really want to do is I want you to be able to tell the audience more about Ably and also about double. I know I'm
FW, come on. I'm dyslexic. I've got the two worst dyslexic, unfriendly business names. And I'm full on dyslexic. What was I thinking? I don't know. I think it's my ADHD side fighting my dyslexia going, this is going to make life hard for you.
Let's get really creative. But I want to make sure people know how to find you as well. And so maybe give us a little description, and you don't have to spend a lot of time, but on what you're doing with Ably, and then also what you're doing with double FW, and then how can people contact you in case they want to work with you, which I'm sure they will.
I'll start with double FW because that's the simplest one. I'm literally just picking up projects every now and again that are, I'm not doing testing and evaluation in that kind of thing or bothering around compliance, but I'm starting to work with organizations to help them think about how they embed accessibility as a function into their organization. How do they design it in as a process thing? And it's all come about, and I'm doing a bit of talking and workshops and bits and pieces, but to try and get organizations thinking in the right way, thinking in a way that is sustainable and meaningful, and it's not falling back on all we have to do is double A and we're sung. It's not. It's get them to change their mindset, get them to be confident enough to ask awkward questions and to have ideas. And it doesn't matter if you're wrong. It's okay failing, but we all should just try. I spent 17, 18 years making massive accessibility mistakes, and I just see I did that so other people don't have to.
That's right. Thank you.
Yeah. But the world is constantly changing and evolving, and so we're constant. This is a constant thing of renewal and exploration, and I think it's really good that we do that. So I'm just double FW. I worked a bit with Miro last year. Thoroughly enjoyed working with them. Absolutely wonderful team. Just spent a few days with them, and said, I'll help you find someone to run this, and I'll help you write the brief. Let's frame the thing of how are we going to deal with this. This is a technology that no one's managed to make accessible yet. It's an area where you've just gone straight on a part of the map where it says there be dragons, and because you've had to, because the only way of building the thing that you've built is using the technology you've done. Just no one has worked out how to do it accessibly yet. So I said, then what we do is we start with sort of first principles and we build towards something that will be accessible. And Mural and the others, they're all doing the same kind of thing. These kind of collaborative platforms, and there's some fantastic teams sparking up, and that's fascinating. And at the moment I'm working with Diageo, and Diageo want to program around this, and they're absolutely brilliant. The culture there is fantastic. But we've got a lot of challenges. And that's the thing that I just want to help organizations do, and get them going and get them momentum, and then step away quietly and let them get on with it.
I agree.
Because
and
it's
I think that's
empowering
the only way to do it, because it's interesting watching vendors versus people inside an organization. And I'm dealing with one woman, her name is Linda Costa, and she worked at PepsiCo, and she really helped pull it all together with all these amazing vendors. But when people talk about it, they only talk about the vendors, not who actually had to do the work inside the BBC, inside PepsiCo.
Yeah, but for the BBC, and that is the result of many years of hard work and
right.
and failures. Yeah, but at the same time, things that we did where we saw opportunities and we took them. And I think there's that kind of be brave around this, and it's okay. It's okay to get it wrong, as long as you learn from getting it wrong, and don't do it that way again, but learn around, because you will always bring interesting things from what you're doing. So I think there's the other thing that one of the big question that I always struggled with at the BBC is what we're doing in Ably, is that because I also set up the design research team at the BBC as well, and I was a head of UX for 12 years. And I wrote policy. I had so many hats. It was ludicrous. And I had to work with all these amazing people. And so one of the things that we always struggled with was evaluating the impact of the accessibility program. We always like to say in accessibility is you make it accessible and it benefits everyone. But then it's really hard to prove. You can logic through it and see the context and see the things, but you need that. One of the things that was always lacking, we could do loads of good qualitative research with people in labs and in their homes, and do ethnographic studies that were inclusive and understand their lives and understand the barriers and understand their needs and their preferences. Really important things, more important than standards and guidelines for me. Understand people's needs and preferences. And then we could apply those and get designers to think about them and evolve and become more inclusive in our approach. But then when something went live, we would go, did it work? And there's a silence and tumbleweed, and no one really knows, because we never had that feedback. Because you can't use sort of small sets. So with iPlayers like 19 million users a week in the UK, and you can't extrapolate 19 million users from a sample set of 30. It just doesn't work. You need big data. And so this was the thing that I set up with 4 others. And so there's Michael Southgate, who's the ex-director of compliance from Google. And so he's a lawyer, he knows data. So we were like, Michael, we need to do this in a way that data is around this subject is tricky. We're dealing with medical data and law and GDPR and all sorts of things. So he's in there to make sure that everything that we do is absolutely data secure and meaningful. And then I've brought in sort of 3 other people who our ex-colleagues from the accessibility team. There's Charlie, Ian, and Michael, and myself. And so we spend a lot of time designing and building sort of algorithms and tools and stuff. And this is the whole thing, is to be able to give the tools for organizations to be able to get the data for them to understand, okay, we made a change. What was the impact of that change? And then so they can see that this moves on, and they can understand what's on fire and where they need. We always have a limited amount of resource, particularly if you've got a huge estate. And if you need to go and do some really in-depth research, or you need to go and do some testing, where do you start?
I know.
And so we want data that will turn around and say, that looks like it's on fire. We're not sure, but that's definitely smoke. It smells like, let's go and have a, you need to forget that. That seems to be okay over there. This is the thing where you need to focus. And we're missing all of that. So we were always guessing. We were always, in a fairly educated way, but just going.
Right. And corporations don't like to guess. They like to have the data. They like to have the data so that, And,
so that's what Readability is all about. It's literally, that's it. We started with the Readability Group. So I was working with a lockdown project that kind of got out of hand, and we ended up doing a massive piece of research with, I think it was 3,500 people around font readability. It was 7,000 hours of testing. It was be careful who you go for dinner with before a pandemic. This is all I've got to say. You end up running a project which is totally non-commercial with absolutely amazing people. I worked with Bruno Mag from Dalton Mag and David Bailey, and it was and Michael Matthews, who's part of Readability now, and we just said we need to create data around readability and legibility of fonts because nobody has any. People keep turning around and telling me that things are accessible to me, and I'm going, no, they're not. This is appalling.
And we do need them. I agree. I know I once again I kept you longer than I was supposed to, and I hope you'll come back on. But will you give us the website for Readability, and also
where to find us?
I know that you're on LinkedIn too.
Find me, Gareth Ford Williams, on LinkedIn. It's not hyphenated. Ford is in the car. Williams, Gareth. It's quite easy. And Gareth F.W., F for Freddie, W for Williams. Ford and Williams, actually. Why did I say Freddie? I've got a name. So Gareth F for Ford, W for Williams. So Gareth F.W., that's me on Twitter. Have a come along and give me a prod on Twitter. And Readability is ab11y.com. It's and that's where we are, and you can contact us off that. But usually through social media is probably where you find us. And it's, I think it's the great thing about this as well. This industry is only just getting going.
I know. Isn't that fun?
We've had a massive run up.
But we have to shift it so that it's not only about compliance conversations. And so that's why I think your voice is really helpful. I appreciate all the work you did with BBC and all the amazing team members. But I'm also really happy that now you're out here to help others, especially the valuable 500. We have 500 organizations that want to include us. We have to give them the tools to be successful.
And they don't have them. This is the problem. They don't have them.
We're learning this as a society. So now we're building metaverses. I don't want a metaverse that isn't inclusive. I'm very hopeful about what you're doing, and I wanted to make sure you were on the show. And also, Gareth, I'm hoping I can talk you into coming back another time to give us updates.
Whenever you want.
Because this is the way we have to do it. I see a lot of money being spent by investors and investing in accessibility companies in the United States, and I don't see impact in any way coming back to the community of people with disabilities. With your work, I do. And so I really want to support people that are supporting us. And so I really appreciate you, Gareth. And I wanted to make sure the audience knew about your work. And there's so much more to know about Gareth, but we'll just start there.
This is the thing with having ADHD. If you haven't got 30 projects on the go at the one time, you can't think about any of them. And so you're constantly on fire. That's the only way I can describe it. It's
fun.
I love it. I absolutely love it because there are so many unanswered questions, and there's so much interesting stuff around this. And it's cultural. And the thing I think people still are not dealing with it as cultural and emotional, and accessibility is emotional.
I agree.
It
I agree.
completely is. And you need to measure that.
I
Not
know.
just about function.
That's why we
It
need
has
your
to be.
That's why we need the tools you're creating. So we
Yeah.
need to support it. So, Gareth, thank you for being on the show today.
Thank you.
And I look forward to you coming back on again. And good luck with both of your organizations. And thank you for your work. Thank you.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Yes. And thank you to the audience.
Thank you.
All right.
If you managed to stay to the end, well done. The rest of you can wake up now. Thank you.
You've been listening to Human Potential at Work. To learn more about Rue Global Impact, visit rueglobal.com. And to learn more about Billion Strong, an identity and empowerment organization designed to bring the billions of voices of persons with disabilities together, you can join the global community and donate at billion-strong.org. That's billion-strong.org.